Good evening, and thank you for joining us on our fourth annual Learning to Lead capstone project. We are so glad you could join us. This year, our theme is Leadership Now. Over the past few months, our small groups have been working hard to explore the difficult areas of leadership and learn how the pandemic has caused leadership to change. This year, the Carlsbad Education Foundation Student Leadership Council looked a little bit different, as there are very few in-person opportunities and all our meetings together were virtual. However, this was not a bad thing. It allowed us to spend more time together. Not only did we get to hear from guest speakers, but we also got to conduct our own research about leadership, from watching TED Talks, reading articles, having group discussions, and learning about the art of public speaking. Tonight, we will share a summary of all our findings throughout the year with 5 truly unique presentations from our small groups, starting with Group 3.
Hello, this is Group 3's presentation. Um, I'll, I'll begin by talking about the food industry. We'll be comparing chain versus local restaurants. I will begin by talking about the chain Great Khan's Mongolian Grill. I spoke to Angel Martinez, who is a general food manager at one of the restaurants here in Carlsbad. Not only is he the manager, he's also my dad, and it was really nice getting to speak to him. He has been the manager at one of the restaurants belonging to the Great Khan's Mongolian Grill chain for over 20 years, and he has worked at this restaurant. He has worked for a really long time at the restaurant, and throughout his career, he has learned how to be a good leader in order to manage his restaurant and provide his customers with a very good place to be. Um, I asked him what he thought was key things in order to be a good leader and run a restaurant successfully, especially a chain restaurant. And he told me that it was very important to be resilient and have good communication with your team. He said that being resilient is really important because, especially during this time that the pandemic happened, it was a very rough time for the restaurant. They closed for a few months, then they opened back up, and then they had to close again. And once they opened back up again officially, they were able to create a safe environment for customers by hiring workers to take temperatures, be sanitized, clean the place. It used to be a self-serve restaurant, but after the pandemic, that obviously could not happen anymore. So they got workers to serve the food for people, and they learned how to adapt to this really hard time, which is very important. And he said, as much as he wishes that the pandemic had not happened, it was very important because they learned through such a rough time how to be more successful and adapt to these situations like these. And he also told me that having good communication is very important because in order to run a successful restaurant chain, you have to maintain a positive work relationship with coworkers because the teamwork helps everything run smoothly, especially in a restaurant. And yeah, it was really nice to speaking with him. Thank you.
Okay, so we then compared the leadership from a chain restaurant to the leadership with a local restaurant, and we spoke with Jessica Waite, who's the co-founder and CEO of The Plot Restaurant in Oceanside. Next slide. There we go. Okay. So just a little bit of background about the Plot restaurant. So Jessica opened the Plot in early 2020 along with her husband and co-founder, Davin Waite, and their mission is to have a zero waste and fully plant-based menu. And she also wants to build the business based on the ideas of conscious capitalism, which is a strategy that will benefit all the partners, customers, and the environment. As the Plot opened at the beginning of quarantine and the pandemic, she's also able to learn a lot about leadership and adaptability. Okay, so there were some key leadership qualities that she learned while working as the co-founder of a restaurant during the pandemic. The first was communication. And Jessica promotes communication as being of utmost importance to ensure that there's quality service at the restaurant and a seamless working environment. The first step in addressing any problem that she and the staff may face is to have open communication. She also learned a lot about adaptability. And when there are bumps in the road, it's necessary to be adaptable. With the closing of restaurants last spring, almost immediately after the plot's grand opening, Jessica and her staff had to make many changes and stay nimble in the face of a challenge. Finally, she learned a lot about resilience. And she said in her interview that resilience is the key to staying successful in the food industry. Jessica mentioned that she couldn't believe that the restaurant was able to survive the long-term closure, yet the plot was able to succeed and continue to provide delicious plant-based food despite the challenges that they faced.
For our next interview, we chose a company in the field of science. Rather than comparing two different leaders from separate companies, we chose to compare an area leader versus a small group leader from the same company.
So the two people that we decided to interview at the company we chose, which was Viasat, those two people that we chose were Sam Butler, who is a business area leader, and Phil Kelleher, who is a systems engineer manager.
Some key takeaways from speaking with Mr. Butler was the need to... Alexa, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. The need to openly and honestly communicate with team members. He explained that this is one of the most important elements to having a cohesive group that accomplish its goals. Also, a common motif in the interview with Mr. Butler was portraying a vision that resonates with each team member. This vision helps motivate the group, gives it a cohesive feel to stay on track, and provides a sense of accomplishment for each individual.
Okay, so then we had a main takeaway from our interview with Mr. Kelleher as well, which was in the area of collaboration. And the important takeaway that we had was that in the interview, he emphasized the importance of having a hands-on approach to leadership, which can help build a sense of community while also sharing knowledge gained through experience. Additionally, this approach to leadership helps to make everyone on the team more well-rounded, and it also gives them the tools necessary to achieve their goals.
So the next type of company that we decided to work through was medicine. So what a small doctor during this time looks like versus like a larger like Kaiser or other group. So next slide. So the first person that we spoke to was Dr. Clancy from the Clancy Medical Group. He owns a family practice here in Carlsbad and has been doing it for about 30 years. Okay, next slide. When I spoke to him, the most important thing that I think I took away from him was that he was really focused on making sure that his patients were well and healthy, but it was almost more important to him to make sure that he was contributing to the dialogue about safety during the pandemic. So he was talking about how it's his job to reassure sick patients and to make sure people feel confident with the vaccine. It was really interesting seeing how much he felt like he was a part of the community, felt like he was a leader in the community, and seeing how he emphasized that within his own practice. Okay, next slide. So the key takeaways that I really got was that he really felt a sense of duty, a sense of responsibility as a family doctor, and he wanted to not only like treat them and give them good medical advice, which he was really proud of, but he really wanted his whole team to understand that it was their responsibility to treat them in the sense of like having empathy and making sure that they feel like they're being communicated with and that there's somebody that cares about their well-being. Okay, cool. Next slide.
So I interviewed the leader of a larger medical corporation. This guy was basically like the general manager of a bunch of hospitals on the East Coast. It's called the Veterans Administration Hospital System. And so, yeah, he basically was the network director for all of the Veteran Administration hospitals in like Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, Alabama, and a few other southern and like eastern coast states. Next slide, please. Okay, so his name was Dr. Mike Lapis, and after speaking with him, I learned a little bit about what a successful leader is. So based on his experiences, he believed that a successful leader is someone who is deeply committed to their mission, so they're always striving towards their goal, and they're always inspiring their employees to work together to strive toward the goal. Also, a successful leader is someone who has people willing to follow them. So that basically means that a lot of people believe that they're a strong leader and a lot of people are willing to listen to their ideas. And then finally, a successful leader is someone who takes responsibility very, very seriously. So like the first point is a person who is always working towards the goal and is always making sure that the necessary steps are needed to be taken to achieve that goal. However, this definition of leadership is a little bit different during this pandemic. According to him and his experiences during this pandemic, a good leader during the pandemic is someone who can really teach those they lead how to adapt. And this is especially important because the pandemic has a rapidly changing nature. And so he needs to be able to communicate well with patients and the other medical professionals that he directs. So basically the biggest difference between leading in this pandemic versus like leading in general is that his communication and adaptability skills need to be top notch. Okay, so as the leader of a large corporation, he also explained how his leadership differs from that of a smaller business. According to him, the two biggest traits that leaders of large corporations need that like leaders of small corporations don't necessarily employ as much are adaptability and flexibility. So basically this is because in a large corporation, you're working like to lead a bunch of people, while in a smaller corporation, your kind of leadership, leadership influence doesn't extend that far. So you really need to be adaptable to everybody's like different ideas and all of your underlings. It's hard for them to work together if you're not flexible and adaptable to their needs. And then one piece of advice he gives to high schoolers interested in the medical field is Despite the challenges of the medical field, you should keep in mind that all this work will enable you to help people in the future. All this work is worth it. And then finally, he shared some of the challenges Veterans Health Administration has faced due to COVID. Some of these include the need for increased staffing, which is obviously due to like the influx of COVID patients, and then also supply chain disruptions, which is basically like them not receiving enough masks or not receiving enough PPE, and then also pressure to decrease PPE use because they've kind of been running out, especially because of the supply chain disruptions, and then also division between coworkers, which is basically because some of his coworkers have like differing beliefs about the pandemic, so it's hard for them to, work with each other. And yeah.
Okay. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so the last group we talked about was the school system, and you can go to the next slide. And we interviewed a teacher, Miss Shannon Alberts, who is the AP Language and English composition teacher at Sage Creek High School, and she teaches juniors. And could you go to the next slide, please? She started off our interview by saying teachers have had to jump with both feet in order to juggle technology and be ready for any scenario. And that led us to some of her key takeaways. And she said that bravery, organization, encouragement, engagement, curiosity, and being committed to making lasting relationships are some of the most important things she has learned from the pandemic. Could you go? Thank you. And one of the things that really stuck with me was how she talked about bravery. And not only did she say that she kind of has had to just jump into being in a classroom. Could you go back a slide, please? Thank you. With being a student, even if she wasn't always comfortable, but she also has had to try new technologies and new teaching methods almost every week. And it's taken a lot from a lot of teachers to kind of go out there and put your brave face on, even if they're not always sure what they're doing. And I think that speaks a lot to the adaptability that a lot of people have had to go through. So now from a student's perspective, we sent out a survey and students replied the most with these responses saying a virtual leader has their camera on, facilitates conversation, communicates well, supports their peers, and shows empathy. And these are really important because a lot of times online people feel disconnected. So having those conversations and showing up as much as you can really helps to create a sense of community, and leaders who do that first allow others to follow and create a large support system among students. Next slide, please. So some of the common themes that we saw throughout all the groups we explored, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Were responsibility, adaptability, bravery, resilience, collaboration, and communication. And overall, one of the most important traits we saw were communication and collaboration, kind of working together and being united in this pandemic is the only way that many people are getting through. And these traits are even more needed than in the past. Next slide, please. So the last topic we wanted to cover is why leadership is important. And we came up with these ideas. Next slide, please. We decided that teaching students like us and as part of the Carlsbad Education Foundation Leadership Council, leadership qualities will help to improve the next generation of leaders, as we will be the ones running the world. And it's important that everyone knows how to handle themselves so that when we become adults, we will be able to work with each other and be accepting of everyone. And we also said that leadership helps to shape the future, and without a strong leader, there's often miscommunications and projects don't get done as effectively. So if you have a leader present, people are more motivated, more engaged, and more willing to work for a cause. And that's our presentation. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ravi Pathik, and I am a senior at Carlsbad High School. I joined the Carlsbad Educational Foundation Student Leadership Council program my freshman year. And admittedly, that first year and that first meeting, I was a little bit scared. Being a freshman and going into this program where there's a bunch of upperclassmen and seniors, being a 14-year-old and having to converse with 18-year-olds was a little bit scary for that first time. But I remember that first meeting, we all walked into the library and we started off with an ice-breaking activity. And we had this foam ball and we had to see how fast we could pass it around the group without dropping it and without any of the people touching. Within 10 minutes, everyone was laughing. Everyone was trying to figure out new strategies on how to pass the ball. And there was no more of that nerves. It was clear that we were just a group. And over that course of that first year, as a member of the Student Leadership Council, I really began to love the program. I mean, not only do we get to learn about leadership from reading different books and different articles and different TED Talks, but then also we got to hear from these speakers that were in professional roles and different leadership roles. And I ended up enjoying the program so much that I've stayed in it since freshman year, all 4 years of high school, and I could not be happier. After 4 years in the program, I unfortunately cannot say that I'm a perfect leader, but what I can say is that I've learned a lot about leadership and about how to apply it not only within the Carlsbad Educational Foundation, but also in other areas of my life. Areas like soccer, areas like school, even just hanging out with friends and how to make better decisions and how to engage everyone around you. The skills that I've learned about leadership and about personality and just about communicating with others within the council have been really effective in other areas of my life. This year, obviously, was a very unique year. We weren't able to meet in person, and a lot of the events that the council usually puts on or helps out with were either transitioned to a virtual format or canceled. So the meeting switched to a Zoom format where we had an online meeting once a month and then a small group meeting every 2 weeks within those monthly meetings. And I think our ability as a program and everyone within the council to shift to this online format really shows the resiliency of all the leaders within this program. I'm part of a couple different things at school and outside of school, and a lot of these programs had to shut down when COVID struck. But CEF's ability to shift to this online format and everyone being able to be adaptable and adjust to this new way of learning about leadership and getting to interact with each other shows that this is really a special group of people, that everyone's interested in learning and everyone's interested in helping each other. And although it was virtual, I think everyone can say that we've still had some pretty fun moments and very interesting moments throughout this year. I have to say some of my favorites have probably been the escape room that we started one of the first meetings. It was a virtual escape room where we all worked together to solve puzzles and do different codes, and we were in teams and we had to see who could finish first. And that was like a great icebreaker and also a great way to just meet everyone else and have a great time within the program. And now leaving the program as a senior and just looking back on my 4 years within it, I hope that I was able to be that upperclassman mentor that 4 years ago the upperclassmen were to me. And I'm really looking forward to seeing this program grow in the future. And I think that there's a bunch of great people in it and everyone is going to do great things. So thank you to CEF. Thank you to everyone in the program. And with that, I'll pass it off to Maddie, who's going to introduce our Group 1 capstone project video.
Hi, I'm Maddie Schaefer, and we are Group 1. We did our presentation on how our world has adapted to COVID in the long term. We did our presentation in a news report style, and split it up into sectors of school, local businesses, and the healthcare industry. So now we will present our video.
Hello, my name is Faith Klein, and this is SLC News, reporting live from the courtesy of our bedrooms. Recently, we have passed the 1-year anniversary of COVID, so our team will be discussing how we've adapted in the long-term perspective of things to COVID. I'll be sending it over to Maddie and Jordan, who will be talking about the education system and going over an interview they had with a teacher.
What's your name and what do you teach?
So my name is Tom Bloomquist. I teach U.S. History and AP Government and Regular Government at Sage Creek High School.
And how has your role of being a teacher changed and how have you adapted since this pandemic?
It's changed greatly. I'm all about relationships, and certainly during the pandemic this year, beginning of this year, last year, not so much because you've already established relationships, but this year, starting out completely online, it was really hard to get to know my students. But we adapt, right? And we make adjustments and made the best out of what I would consider a horrible situation.
And how have you prepared for the hybrid split?
It's incredibly difficult. How I prepared is I ran a pilot program, so I had 6 or 8 kids in my classroom during one period, and so I was able to practice getting to know how to use the cameras, how to use the technology, how to try to split your time between the kids in class, the kids online, and so I practiced. That was the best way that I prepared.
Up next is Ravi and Claire, who will be reporting on local businesses.
It was on March 11th of 2020 when the World Health Organization officially declared COVID-19 to be a pandemic. Since then, the ways that we dine, shop, and have fun have all drastically changed. Claire and I went down to the Carlsbad village to talk to a couple local businesses about how strong leadership and teamwork have gotten them through these tough times.
How did COVID affect the business at the beginning of the pandemic?
So we closed down for probably 4 months, I think.
At first, it did slow us down. My hours actually got cut. I'm like the first assistant manager here. I was cut down to 4 days.
It was just the owner and his girlfriend kind of doing mail orders. We were all shut down, but they would just sell and mail some stuff to regular.
And as far as my leadership, it's an ever-changing thing. I mean, when I first became into management, I was really hardcore. And I still am, but I'm a lot more diplomatic now. You know, you get more with honey than you do with the other thing.
Yeah. And how is the owner, Mark, a good leader?
He treats us pretty well. He's, a good boss. He actually works with us, which I like, because I've worked in places, I've, worked alongside bosses, and it always works a lot well if they're actually, they're doing the work with you. He's just a really good guy, and he's really understanding.
What qualities are important in a leader?
I guess, like I said, just being able to work with your workers, people that you have employed underneath you, and being understanding, I guess, just not talking down to people, but trying to reach I don't know how to word it right.
No, that makes sense.
But just being kind and taking care of the people that work for you, I guess.
Thank you so much, Mark. I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Adapting to the pandemic's changes weren't that easy. But as you saw, a little bit of flexibility, understanding, and teamwork helped these businesses get through a tough time. And it's what helped us as well.
Next, we have Neil reporting on the healthcare system.
My name is Dr. Andrew McCarty. I'm board certified in emergency medicine and hospice and palliative care, and I'm the director of the emergency care line for Scripps Health, which means I help coordinate the 4 emergency departments, our 2 trauma centers, which is Scripps Mercy in San Diego and Scripps La Jolla, and our 2 community emergency departments, it's Scripps Chula Vista and Scripps Encinitas. And then I'm the director of the emergency department at Scripps Encinitas, where I see patients 14 days a month and help coordinate the interaction of the emergency departments with our 3 urgent cares.
Could you just go over how your role as a leader has changed through the pandemic?
So leadership is a really interesting thing. It's some people refer to as the burden of leadership because it really is. My style of leadership and my culture of leadership is one of multiple inputs and allowing people to come to me with problems and solutions and trying to find the best way to add value to a patient's medical problem. Prior to the pandemic, my goals were to try to get all providers to do things the same.
Looking back at last year and like the hospital's COVID response, what do you think that you would have done differently?
I think what we could have done differently was maybe take a harder look at some of the new therapies and the data behind those therapies. Because what happened was people did solution jumping and would come up with ideas that were driven by multivariate, but were not necessarily true.
All right, thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Sonathan Solperker, and next up we have our final interview coming from Eliana Lay.
Hello, Eliana Lay. I am interviewing
Diana Lay.
Thank you for your time today. If you would please briefly state what you do for work. To the camera, please.
I manage all of the global trial managers, the clinical trial coordinators, and sometimes other roles that all work together towards clinical research in finding new medications to cure diseases.
How has COVID influenced your work?
So all of my staff works from a remote position, means they all work from their own homes. So as far as COVID affecting the work, that hasn't affected them based on like where their work location is. But we also have a function of clinical research associates that go out to the physicians' offices all over the country, all over the world, really, to ensure data integrity and patient safety. And that particular role has not been able to travel during COVID. So it's made some challenges in that we still have database locks and requirements for FDA and milestones that we have to meet. So we've had to be very much flexible in how we work, finding solutions that are outside the box, but within guidelines, and finding new ways of work to make things happen, to be able to move those timelines, to move towards those timelines in a world that we never thought we would see.
So definitely not being there just as their boss, but also being there to support them, have them know that you're there for them for any concern. It might not be related to work, but you will be there for them.
Absolutely. I think that is something that's really important in leadership, is to know that your upper management, your executive management are not sitting in their so-called, ivory tower or in their big offices where they're unapproachable. One of the great things that makes you a good leader is that you have an open door policy, open phone, whatever it is nowadays, right? That people know that they can reach out to you and talk to you, and you're there to listen to them about their problems, and that their problems make a difference to you. Like, they're important. Each individual is important.
Right. Well, thank you for your time. It's been a lovely interview. It was nice talking to you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I believe group one's video is over. But hello everyone, my name is Romy Koffler and I'm a freshman at Carlsbad High School and I am part of group 2. So for our capstone project, we created a small video with a theme of small versus large businesses with a slight focus on COVID and how it affected these businesses. So to ensure our project ran as smooth as possible, everyone in the group assigned themselves a role. So they gave themselves roles such as a small business interviewer or a large business researcher and more. So a few things that we learned from our project were how owners have actually adjusted from COVID and how did COVID change the way that they led and ran their business, and what they have actually learned from their experience as a business owner, and finally, how their business has changed or adapted over time. And I would also love to give a big thank you to Scarlett Rousseau for editing and putting together the video. We would not be able to watch it without you. So go ahead and play the video for everyone. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Scarlett, and this is our capstone project. First, we have Jack talking about general trends in small and large businesses.
Small and large businesses, general trends. Generally speaking, smaller businesses often involve leaders working alongside their employees. At a smaller scale, the business has fewer employees to manage and a greater focus on day-to-day affairs. For instance, at a restaurant, the owner might cook with their employees during busy hours. However, as businesses grow, leaders generally become less involved in the day-to-day affairs of the company and more focused on leading others to do these tasks separately. Taking the example of the restaurant from before, as the restaurant expands and opens additional locations, the owner has more stores and employees to keep track of. It is less likely for them to work directly in the field and more likely for them to focus on leading those around them. This transition point is a challenge for many. Jim Whitehurst, the former COO of Delta turned CEO of small business Red Hat, posits, I think that's where a lot of companies get into trouble. Small company people can't run big because they can't let go. Most big company people couldn't run a small company because they can't actually do. This extends further as the scale of a business increases, where the CEO of a company has managers leading their own teams within teams. This hierarchical model is called the top-down approach to leadership and has been found to maximize the management of the company. However, experts argue the model can cause difficulties in leadership. While it may seem efficient, the leader may become isolated from their employees' unique skills and perspectives. Critics of the top-down approach favor the bottom-up approach, which is more common in smaller businesses. Leaders request employee input, seeking to lead rather than manage, but this approach can be difficult to produce at a large scale. Despite the differences in required skills and actions between leaders of small and large businesses, generally speaking, the desired qualities of leaders remain consistent. Employees want leaders that they look to not only for instruction but also guidance. Although the skills to achieve these qualities can be different, it is beneficial for leaders of all business sizes to understand the importance of these leadership qualities.
That was very informative. Next, we have Holly interviewing a local Starbucks manager.
I interviewed Sam Gaylor, who's a head manager at a Starbucks location in Carlsbad, and my first question to her was, how did the pandemic affect the corporation and how has it adjusted now?
I feel like the pandemic has had a pretty big impact on the corporation, whether it be in relation to operations or sales or partner care. There have been a lot of changes, but I feel like Starbucks has adjusted pretty well to all of the changes, especially throughout the past year. I feel like just like everyone else, as we have learned more, we've been able to adapt a little better to what has been thrown our way. Cleaning was way different, way more frequent. How we clean is going to be different. I feel like we have adjusted as we have learned more about coronavirus. And the more we learn, the more we adjust how we take each day operationally, how the partners are handling it. So it's had a pretty big effect on the company, but I feel like current state, we've rebounded and we're coming back pretty strong. You can see in a lot of stores, sales are growing. The general public is out and back and ready for coffee. So we're getting back to normal.
My second question was, how has Starbucks changed and adapted over time, even when the pandemic wasn't present?
I feel like Starbucks as a whole is a company that is based around change. I feel like we're always changing. We're always trying to be more efficient. We're always trying to make things better. We're always trying to figure out what the customer wants. So I feel like pandemic or no pandemic, Starbucks is very flexible and very adaptable to change. So in a way, I feel like Starbucks was able to take the pandemic and make the most of it, because even before the pandemic happened, we're always changing. I feel like I'm always telling partners like, hey, what you knew a week ago might be different in a week's time, but it's a good thing.
Lastly, as a leader yourself, What are some things you've learned from your experience as a manager?
I feel like I have learned to be patient and to not set expectations that are unrealistic, to not stress over things I can't control, to be more flexible with what happens that you don't expect to happen. I feel like the last year has made me a better leader because I'm more confident in my ability to act when my plan has been changed. So I have learned a lot, and I've learned what I don't want to do and what I want to do more of in the future, and how I run my business and how I manage my team.
I love hearing how big businesses are doing during COVID. Next, we have Madison interviewing Blues and Shoes.
I interviewed an employee at a small business in the Carlsbad village called Blues and Shoes, and here are the questions that I asked her. First question is, how has the pandemic affected Blues and Shoes, and has Blues and Shoes been able to adapt as of now? And her response was, yes, the pandemic has affected Blues and Shoes. At the beginning of the pandemic, they had just private appointments, very minimal capacity. And as of recently in May, they opened up to the general public once again with limited capacity, wearing masks, cleaning all the time. The pandemic definitely affected the number of people that were coming in the store just due to safety precautions, but otherwise they'd be able to get back on their feet again. The question is, how do Blues and Shoes have to adapt due to the pandemic? And her response was that they had to take very strict safety and cleaning procedures for the health and well-being of the general public. This includes having people stay 6 feet apart, masks on, limiting the capacity of their guests allowed in their store, and even quarantining the clothes to make sure that the general public is safe. The last question is, being an employee at Blues and Shoes, what is something that you've learned from working through a pandemic? And her answer was that people are willing to go through great lengths to protect the health and safety of those around them and spread as much love as possible in order to protect their community.
That was really interesting. I love learning how small businesses are adapting to COVID. Next, we have Victoria talking about the effects of COVID on businesses.
The effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on businesses in Carlsbad. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, local businesses who rely on customers to make money have been faced with an extremely difficult year. Without being able to provide for customers in person, keeping a business open during the pandemic is impossibly challenging, resulting in many local businesses having to close. Belladora Spa and Salon was a local and award-winning salon and spa that has been serving the Carlsbad community since 2004. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Belladora Spa and Salon's business decreased dramatically. Unfortunately, the spa and salon was forced to shut down due to not being able to pay the high rent. Many local businesses have also been forced to close temporarily. Employees get laid off not only from temporary closures, but also from businesses who need to cut their staff to afford rent. A lot of local businesses, especially in desirable locations, have extremely high rent to pay, and the pandemic has made paying the rent extremely challenging. Employees are often directly in contact with many different customers and get exposed to many different people, putting them at risk. Protecting employees' health during the pandemic has been a challenge and a necessity.
It is extremely devastating that many small businesses are going through such a struggle during these hard times. But with the vaccine out and many small businesses reopening, there's a large window for businesses to get back on their feet. So after COVID, let's hope that happens. This concludes our capstone project. Thank you for watching, and we hope you found this entertaining and enjoyable, and most importantly, informative. Goodbye.
Hey everyone, my name is Faith and I'm a junior at Sage Creek. This will be my second year in SLC and I'm looking forward to serving next year as well on the council, hopefully. I found that throughout my time here in SLC, being able to collaborate with the other students who are like-minded and similar to myself has been really beneficial and successful. Like Ravi had mentioned previously, it's kind of intimidating on the first day coming in, whether you're a freshman or whatever year it is. My first day was last year in sophomore year, And it was still pretty intimidating because I was still an underclassman and just seeing all these people. And I do think that after the icebreaker, like he mentioned, we did a similar icebreaker. And I think that it's very beneficial after that. And it kind of just broke the ice. So it did its job. And I think that I pretty much formed a lot of connections with people right off the bat. And I think that just I noticed that these people are really like-minded, and you see them in a lot of your other clubs that you're in, and you really got a sense of how similar you are to these other people. So to be able to have this whole council of everybody that kind of has the same type of schedule and knows how it is to be a really hardworking student and an aspiring leader as well, was very beneficial. And to have these conversations with all of them and be very open and just being able to be honest about everything has really shown me how great it was to have just a council of a lot of people in our community. Other than that, I think that as well, for me, being able to, my leadership over the last 2 years has definitely come a long way. Although I cannot say that I'm a perfect leader today, I think that SLC has shown me that nobody could say they were a perfect leader and that there's always a lot to do. Like a good working leader can always keep working on their skills. And I know that I'll be working on my leadership skills for the rest of my life. And I do think, though, that I've come a long way throughout these last 2 years. Previously mentioned, we have worked with several types of different assignments, such as TED Talks and books and videos that I would have never listened to, quite frankly and honestly, before, if I hadn't had the opportunity and gotten them like assigned or gotten the book, because SLC is kind and gives us a lot of different things in the beginning of the year, like some books and some workbooks that go along with the books we read. And I do think that these have been really helpful for my leadership path. And in addition to that, I think that in person, we did do a lot of hearing and lectures from people from a lot of different businesses that you would have never anticipated. Like, I think that hearing from like some people that were authors and some people that I'd never heard of and some people that are working within like the theater industry, and just knowing that really it could be any leader in any type, big platform, small platform, or really any type of field. They all have their own experiences, and being able to hear all of their stories and hear about how they've grown as a leader has really helped us. And I know personally me has allowed me to see that nobody's perfect and leadership can mean many things to a lot of people. And I think that after I've been through all of these meetings in person, I do applaud SLC because they've done a great job this last year and even last year, because we did get shut last year as well, shut off early. And I think that going directly in and just being able, like Ravi had said, a lot of my other clubs had stopped, but this club has found a way for us to still be getting those guest speakers every single meeting and hearing from people that I would have never thought that would have been able to give me advice about stuff, and just really hearing about everything. I really think that SLC has done a great job being able to show everybody all this, all these different industries and all these different roles as what it means to be a leader. And I definitely think that over the last 2 years, my leadership path has grown tremendously, and it's shown not only in this club, but a lot of the little things that we just learn about in this club, like taking on responsibility and learning all the traits of what it takes to be a leader, has not only helped me in leadership positions, though it has helped me tremendously in leadership positions, but previously mentioned, like Robbie said, it's helped me in a lot of other clubs as well. And simply just when I'm hanging out with my friends or doing everyday things, it's really helped me with managing a lot of relationships and establishing a lot of connections with people and making sure that I stay in tune with myself and with who I want to be. So I'm very thankful to have been in SLC the last 2 years, and I'm looking forward to next year as well. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Pajka Lakshman and I'm the group leader for Group 5. And our group explored how we have grown as leaders during the pandemic and what we're going to implement going forward. We have included both student self-reflections and interviews with professionals in education, athletics, and technology. Our group is comprised of Auburn, Ben, Kelsey, McKenna, Kay, Ryan, McKenna, and Warren, and a huge shout out to Ryan and Warren for putting the video all together.
For our topic today, we want to reflect on how we had developed our leadership skills this year through activities, volunteering, and by the inspiration of our guest speakers. Along with this, we thought we should get in touch with some leaders in our community and ask them how their leadership styles have changed due to COVID and what a good leader does to adapt in times of change.
Hi guys, my name is McKenna Rangel and I'm a senior at Carlsbad High School, and I have learned a ton this year from my time in SLC, but I wanted to talk about two major takeaways that I had from our discussions and from the leaders that came to talk to us. So the first major takeaway for me was being able to take responsibility for your life as a leader. Ever since we talked about this, I've been consciously trying to remind myself that I am in control of the choices that I make. And I think that's something that's really easy for people to forget. Most people kind of let life happen to them, which is understandable, but leaders take control of the things that are, within their power, and then let the rest roll off their back. And don't let it phase them. So this is not to say that leaders don't have bad days, because obviously they do. Everyone has bad days. I'm just saying that leaders take responsibility for the bad and the good, and then do their best to improve upon that where they can. The second major takeaway for me was learning to lead by example instead of brute force. So it's really easy to assume that leaders are always the people in the room that are taking control of a situation or that they have the loudest voice, but that isn't necessarily true. Leaders have what I like to call discernment, which means that they can recognize the role that would be most helpful in a given situation, and then they assume that role. Instead of letting pride and ego run the show, real leaders lead others through integrity and humility, whether that be loudly or quietly. So throughout this year, I've really learned a lot about leadership, and my perspective on it has really changed. I think I have definitely become a better leader by learning to, as I said, take responsibility for my life and the decisions that I make, and then also focusing on leading by example. So yeah, thank you so much, SLC, for giving me this opportunity, and I've loved every second of it.
One aspect of my life that has changed during the COVID-19 pandemic is my leadership. This has affected me in almost all aspects of my life, but the one I will focus on right now is volleyball. Last year, I was on the 2s team at my club and had been trying for the past 4 years to make it onto the 1s team. When the pandemic came around, rather than sitting on the couch every day watching TV, I played volleyball anytime that I could. I had to motivate myself and develop my leadership skills by being forced to lead and persuade myself not to give in to distractions. In July, my gym slowly started opening up, and using the skills that I had learned on my own, I persuaded my club to allow me to attend invitational open gyms. I went almost every day and did strength training at the same time. The beginning of August, I got a call and found out I had made the 1s team. I was so completely ecstatic that all my hard work had paid off. At first, I didn't feel like I fit in, but I continued to be positive and worked my hardest every day. These aspects of leadership allowed me to flourish and prove I was an important part of the team. It showed me that leadership skills, even if you're not a leader, can benefit you in many different ways in many different aspects of your life.
Now we have interviews with the principal of Sage Creek, Mr. Schuweiler, Sage Creek's athletic director, Mrs. Williams, and the co-founder of Accelerate Cloud Solutions and founder of Unbuttoned Innovation, Mrs. Hirsch.
What has been the greatest difficulties or challenges while transitioning from strictly in-person and on-campus leadership and learning to virtual leadership and learning?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously there's been a ton of difficulties and challenges, right, in this transition to, distance learning, to hybrid learning, to, all the different iterations of what we've experienced this year. For me, I think when I think about, leadership and I think about, what we're all going through, to me, leadership is really a lot. It's like a mixture between pushing and pulling, right? And when you're talking about leading people, sorry, I'm just turning my radio down. When you're talking about leading people and leading groups of people, it's a mixture, I believe. Sometimes you have to push, sometimes you have to pull, Sometimes you have to put your arm around people. It's all of those things, right? And in transitioning from like what you're saying is like a virtual leadership to or from an in-person to a virtual leadership, some of the challenges are like not physically being able to be around other people, not physically being able to be in a classroom to be inspired, to give a smile, a word of encouragement to students or teachers. It's important for me as a leader, as an instructional leader, to accurately gauge kind of the pulse in a classroom and the temperature, right, of our students learning. What are they learning? How are they learning it? What's the teacher doing? Is the teacher understanding the temperature in the room? Are the students engaged? You can do some of those things in a virtual environment, but it's much more challenging, as you know, right, as far as being able to read those things and understand those things. This is my 21st year in education, and I've seen teaching for a long time. And in this model, it's new for all of us. And so there's a learning curve, and it takes some time to get acclimated. And I know that our staff has worked diligently with our students and each other to collaborate to provide the best quality instruction in the virtual environment as possible. But like with all things, we have needed to be adaptable, flexible. We've had to learn, reflect, and grow through this process of how to do things differently. To me, that's part of having like a growth mindset and that attitude of perseverance. Those are two things that I personally, as a leader, value greatly. I appreciate those that approach these challenges and obstacles with solutions, with ideas versus, this sucks. This is a problem. I can't do it, right? And so to me, it's important as a leader that I continue to model those things, right? Of let's work through this challenge. Let's continue to see where can we get better? How can we do things differently? But those conversations and being able to build those relationships in person, those have been very difficult to do this year. So, I guess that's how I would answer your question.
And that's interesting that you touched on the point about like bringing solutions and being positive, because in our last council meeting, we had council member Acosta come talk to us. And so she was saying that, she loves to hear community feedback, but a lot of the stuff that she's getting is just, this is a problem. Like, how are you going to fix it, instead of like bringing solutions to a problem? So I really like having your perspective on that.
Absolutely.
So first, could you just describe your leadership position?
So I am currently the athletic director at Sage Creek High School. So I oversee all of our sports programs. We have 19 different sports programs here at Sage Creek. And I oversee anything from facilities for athletics to scheduling to clearing of athletes, making sure they're eligible. And I work both with the district, our school administration, and then also with CIF and the North County Conference as well.
Okay, awesome. And what has been the biggest challenge you faced as a leader through the pandemic?
I would say my biggest challenge has been communicating with the people that I serve. We had a really long time in the early parts of the pandemic where we just really didn't know what was going to happen with athletics, and it wasn't something that was being talked about. So as athletic directors, we kept getting together and trying to gather information from the state and different stakeholders. And that wasn't a priority, obviously, because we were really dealing with the other aspects of the pandemic. And then as things started to move along, just making sure that everybody that I serve understood where we were at. So really just that communication piece, because there was a long time there was nothing to say, but people wanted, to know things. And then all of a sudden there was a lot to say, and you wanted to make sure that you gave the right information because things were changing. There were days where I would be told something in the morning, and by that afternoon, it had completely changed, and we were re-sending things out. So I would say communication was probably one of the biggest challenges.
Definitely. Okay, how do you feel your leadership style has changed since before the pandemic to now, if it's changed at all?
I don't know if this would be a leadership style, but one of the things that I've definitely had to work on and that I've improved upon, I would say, is my flexibility. I'm a big planner. One of the things I like about my job is I get to plan an entire year out, and everything's pretty planned and scheduled. And that's something that I like and I'm comfortable with. And so during this pandemic, I've had to learn to be flexible. I've had to learn to readjust schedules. We had everything ready to start in August, and then we moved it to December, and then we moved it to February. We just had to kind of keep moving things along, and every time you moved it, it had to change because it wasn't going to fit. So I would say definitely learning to be more flexible. We had a general plan, but then we always were constantly, tweaking it a little bit. So flexibility has probably been my biggest change over this whole thing.
Awesome. And then, is there anything that you've learned or even that change that you had during the pandemic that you also hope to keep as a part of your leadership style, even once all of this is over?
When I saw that question, I thought of two different things. The first thing that came to my mind was just the whole idea of we've gone, digital in everything that we do. I used to collect, we used to do meetings in person and collect different forms and do all these things, and we've had to completely redo everything to be digital. And some of it I like, some of it I don't like. The meetings, like I'd prefer to interview with you in person because I think that's, I prefer that kind of a style. But then there's a lot of stuff that's more convenient digital, and having that convenience for people to do things. So that's kind of one of them. But the other one was just getting to know people during this time, because in addition to just what we do as jobs, a lot of us have been impacted by the pandemic in different ways. So I've been able to connect with like coaches and athletes and different people in our sports community, kind of more on a personal level. And I feel like that's something that is really important as a leader, to know the people that you serve, maybe not only in their role, like for me, like as a coach, not only knowing somebody as a coach, but knowing more about them personally. It helps me to help them be a better coach. And so that's something I think that really I grew in during the pandemic, because I felt that need to connect with people. And so I hope to continue that when we move out of this pandemic.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your businesses, how they got started, and the business model?
Sure, absolutely. So we'll start, they're both consulting businesses, so both professional services and both deep in the technology arena. And Button Innovation has been around for about 6 years, and it's all about custom software development and that traditional management consulting. So working with companies to really focus on developing or focusing in on their strategy, how they're going to market, how they become profitable, and getting their people and their tools and technologies all in alignment. Accelerate is a little bit different in that it's really focused on getting to the cloud faster and about automation technologies. So taking those common tasks that really take up a lot of time and are repeatable, automating them, putting digital workers into the workspace alongside the human workers, and making things more efficient and more accurate.
So during the pandemic, were there any significant challenges that you faced in running your businesses, and how were you able to overcome them?
I think the challenge for a lot of people is just the unknown, right? So it's going to be over quickly. It's going to be over in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and having those dates extend, right? That's always really challenging. I think too, it's trying to have empathy for other people in their situations. So giving people the grace of space and time to get done what they need to do. People have had kids at home when normally they've been in school. They've had relatives who have fallen ill that they've needed to help, or perhaps worse yet, they haven't been able to help because of distance and not being able to travel. So I think a big lesson learned for everyone in this time is to try to understand what people might be going through, whether they want to share it with you or not, and give them that grace to say, okay, we can start over, we can do this, we can do that, things happen. I mean, even today is a great example, right? I'm late from getting my vaccine for this call, which I felt so bad about, but I appreciate your grace in letting me be late and drop you a note and say, hey, this isn't going as planned. This is how it's going to work out, and I'm so sorry, right? Things happen, and it's not just during a pandemic. And the best laid plans can go awry. So I think there are some good things that have come out of this pandemic. I think the ability to work from home for some people has been fantastic, right? They've gotten to be with their families, with their pets, with whomever, more than maybe they would have in other areas. So I think there's some positives come out of that, and that's definitely been a change for people to work at home. I think one of the challenges, and again, I've worked at home for a while, so I'm a little bit better, and I'm fortunate to have space in my house that's dedicated as an office, so I can shut the door. But for a lot of people, it's tough to do the work from home balance because work and home are now commingled completely. And so how do you turn that off? Because your laptop's right there to answer that one last email or to just jump on, after dinner, between bedtime and bath or what have you. So that separation is not always super easy. So there have been some good lessons learned, I think, for all of us to try and actually say, stop work here, because now it actually is family time, even though they're literally in the same space these days.
Yeah. And of course, no problem at all. So what is your usual leadership style, do you think, and how did it change due to the pandemic?
My usual leadership style. I expect a lot from people. I expect that we work in the fast pace of technology. On the custom development side, we're on that bleeding edge always. I expect people to bring their best whenever they can, to be their best, to give a heads up on things. It's funny, I teach a class as well. I teach a business professional development class. And one of the things that we're trying to encourage with the students is if you need an exception, you need to raise your hand and say advance. If you're going to miss a class, if you're late on an assignment, no, that's not good. But to at least raise your hand and say, hey, I'm going to be a couple of hours late because of XYZ, at least give people a heads up, communicate. So I hope that I'm a strong communicator as a leader, setting expectations, setting timelines, both with clients and with my teammates, and that they're doing the same for me. I'm definitely, I would say, a supportive leader. I am truly interested in everyone and what they want to do and understanding where they want to be so that I can help them get there, right? And if someone on my team is interested in, it's outside of work too, right? If you're interested in sports and you've never been to a Padres game and I happen to have tickets to give up, I'd love to be able to give them to that person because I know they've never been and it would mean the world to them. If they are interested in public speaking and there are opportunities to have them try out that skill set in the workplace, at an event, what have you, and we can help support them, those are the things that I want to either subtly or directly give them the opportunity to do and help them get there and practice that for themselves.
Hello, I am Samuel Daher, and I'm going to be showing you Group 4's slide presentation. Let me just share the screen with. To be able to share the presentation, I need whoever's sharing right now to unshare so I can. Thank you. So, Group 4, we created a slide deck. It's about leadership and change. We're just talking about how leaders were able to develop themselves throughout the pandemic and outside of the pandemic in their own areas, and how in their collective fields we're able to develop and work hard. So here are the group members. So there's Kendall Furman, Aiko Lozar, Shreya Remish, Sophia Hahn, Chloe Kegel, Isabella Reagan, me, Samuel Daher, Luke McCullen, and Aaron Del Grande. So we're the ones who worked on this presentation, and thank you very much for taking the time to look at and be here for this presentation. So Kendall or Aiko or Shreya, you guys can talk about your project right now.
Yeah, so basically, in this interview, we discussed the ramifications of COVID-19 on the political leadership sector. So, City Councilwoman Priya Patel described her recent challenges and prescribed advice for emerging leaders in a post COVID-19 era. So, we just posted this interview right here if you just want to play it.
Got it. Just to make sure, got it. Just to make sure, how long is the interview again? Just to make sure.
It's 8 minutes.
Got it. I'm not sure we have the time for 8 minutes. You know, I'll play it and we'll see. Is that good with you?
Yes.
Great.
Hello, and welcome to our interview with Carlsbad City Council member Priya Patel.
So, how has the pandemic and the shift from in person to online affected your ability to connect with voters and conduct outreach regarding your campaign for state senate? And how has that also affected your work as a Carlsbad councilwoman?
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely very different. I do think that there's two different sides. There's definitely one where there's more accessibility to folks. So a lot of people that may not have had the time to connect or may not have had the capacity to connect previously because when you're in person and if somebody has to go to work in person or whatever else, you may not be able to connect with them. That's more on the campaign side. And for the campaign, I think now, since people are more used to connecting on the phone or Zoom, they are more willing to pick up and have conversations with us because they're expecting that that's maybe somebody else calling or something to that extent. So I do think that we've seen an increase in the number of people that actually are picking up calls or, just having conversations. And then for the council side, we've seen an increase in people actually calling in for council meetings. Generally, we would have, not too many folks coming in for public comment unless there was something that was a hot button issue. But now almost every week we have a lot of people coming in or not coming in, but calling in for public comment because they can do it from the comfort of their home. So I think just the ease of accessibility, obviously not everyone has access to internet. So this is obviously going to be more geared towards people that have that ability. But I do think we need to figure out how we can make it more accessible, especially to those that may not have access to the internet. That's something that I've been working on. But yeah, I would say overall it's increased access. We just need to figure out how we can continue it moving forward. And that's something that, again, I have advocated for that. I said, even if we go back to in-person in the next few months, I do think we should maintain some sort of Zoom or call-in option for people so that they have the opportunity to still stay engaged, even if they're unable to make it in person. So
yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think that there will be any long-term effects on leadership or on politics in general as a result of the pandemic and the shift to a virtual platform? And if so, do you know maybe what that would entail or have any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of leadership itself, I mean, again, I think we'll have more of a reach in being able to connect with people. That's really exciting, I think. Otherwise, I feel, the biggest piece is going to be the digital divide, which I kind of alluded to in the first question, which is something that we really need to work on pushing to make sure that we're actually closing, because there are many communities that won't have access to their elected leadership or other folks or just even education for that matter. And I think it's very important to make sure that we're actually doing what we can at our leadership level to advocate for that, because it's going to be so essential to make sure we don't have folks getting left behind. This pandemic has obviously made it almost astronomically more difficult for those divides to get bridged. And I think it's a matter of trying to figure out not even just the digital divide, but even the economic divide and so many other things that have happened through this pandemic. So for leadership overall, yes, like the pandemic has done quite a bit, and trying to make policies that we can actually make sure that are being addressed in an equitable manner and not necessarily just going to be beneficial for one particular segment of the community, unless of course those individuals are the ones that need the help. But I think we need to make sure that we're doing it in a manner that is really thinking of it from a preventative standpoint moving forward, because a lot of the things that we tend to put forward tend to be reactionary. And so I think overall, hopefully it'll be a positive turn of events as we move forward. But I think that overall with leadership, I'm hoping and praying like that all of our different levels of government are actually thinking of it from that standpoint versus just like, hey, we're through the pandemic and now we don't have to like really think about too much more moving forward. It's like, no, we need to think about how we create a plan for this specifically if it were to continue, like if we were to have a pandemic again, to make sure that we actually have something in place that actually is a fail safe. Because right now I feel like we've just kind of done a trial by fire.
Yeah.
And I do think that we need to have a better way of addressing it, because we could have done a lot better job than we did previously.
Definitely.
So,
I could not agree more. In your opinion, what is the most significant leadership lesson that maybe you have gained from COVID, or just in general you think you could take away from COVID?
yeah, I think that COVID obviously, increased a lot of the divide throughout our country. And I do think that during this time, being a legislator during such a very dynamic and different time has really pushed me to be more. I mean, I've always been compassionate, but pushed me to be even more compassionate and understand, what folks are going through and how we can make sure that even if you may not necessarily agree with someone's viewpoints, being able to listen and then try and take it in and also understand how to maybe come to a compromise between the different viewpoints is very necessary. That's something that I've always led with. And I think that this has just made it more so necessary, because as we're moving past this as well, there are still those feelings of divide. And I think what we're going to need to do as leaders is make sure we can bring people together. And regardless of opinion, because the beauty of our country is that everyone can have whatever opinion they have, right? And so I think that's the piece where, like, for me, is as a legislator, ensuring that everyone can have that opinion and then trying to make sure we can have solutions that work for everyone. And yes, it'll be hard because there will be times where some solutions may not necessarily feel like it works for someone. But I think just being able to listen is something that a lot of folks really just want in their elected leadership.
And then my last question is, do you have any advice for aspiring leaders?
Yes, I would say just stay true to yourself. People will tell, especially young people, to change time and time again. And I always tell everyone, you don't have to do that. Just be yourself. And especially for young women, we are told so many times to be a certain way, dress a certain way. We're also told, not to do certain things a specific way. And sometimes we're told, like, for instance, we're told to wait our turn to do something. And I think for all of us, regardless of if you're a woman or you're young in general, I think realizing that your time is whenever you decide your time is to do something, and that when you put your set your mind to it or set your heart to it, as long as you're passionate about it, you can get it done. So I think that's the biggest thing I would say, is making sure that whatever you do makes you happy. And as long as you're happy and you feel like you're fulfilling your purpose, I know it sounds cliche, but it's so true. Like, just do it, just do it. And don't let the naysayers get to you. It can be hard, but that would be the biggest piece of advice.
Thank you so much for listening. Hello and welcome to our interview
Hi, my name is Sophie Hahn, and my partner was Chloe Cagle, and our project title is Leadership in the Healthcare Field Throughout COVID-19. In this interview, we discuss what it's like to be a leader and small business owner in the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. David Hahn, also my dad, goes in depth on some of the advantages and disadvantages of the changes he had to make as a leader for his business.
Hi, I'm Sophie Hahn.
And I'm Chloe Cagle.
And this is Dr. Hahn.
Hi, my name is Dr. David Hahn. I am a owner and head orthodontist of Hahn Orthodontics, located in Vista, California, North County. And I'm also married to a lovely wife, Alice, for the last 18 years. And I've been practicing for 18 years in Vista as well. And then I have my two daughters that are 15 and 12, 15-year-old Sophie Hahn, that's here. And I've also lived in Carlsbad for the last 18 years as well. So as you can see, there's a lot that happened 18 years ago.
Okay, so what changes have you had to make since the pandemic?
Well, overall, we had to reduce the number of patients initially just because of social distancing and some of the precautions that we have to take. Secondarily, we've always been very good with our universal precautions, but we've also had to make that better in the sense that we've added several different medical grade air purifiers, number one. And then secondarily, there's external suction units that we've added to the office to reduce the aerosol that's produced when you're using the drill. And lastly, we've also implemented what's called COVID questionnaires, and we're asking that of each patient before they come in. So if they have a high risk situation or if they've been exposed, we may delay their appointment or postpone it until a later date. And then we're of course taking the temperature scan when they come into the office.
Very cool. Okay. So my question about those changes is, do you see any advantages or disadvantages with them? Have you found any so far?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with that, we've been using less pens and less clipboards, less paper. Our office has always been paperless, where we were, charting on computers and such. But because of the pandemic, we've used actually less and less because we don't want to have exchanges of pens and paper and things touched and wiping things down. So we've gone more electronic to the point that it's actually very green, and more green is always good. So that's been an advantage. Disadvantage, I feel like there's less number of patients that we're seeing each day. And so from a business point of view and also appointments for patients, there's less appointments available for patients too, just because it's a little further out with less number of patients we're seeing.
How have you kept your team and or employees motivated during this time?
That's another good question. I think just looking at my personality, I'm more of a calm demeanor kind of person. So as I approach the whole COVID virus and pandemic, I've been trying to be calm about it. And I think that in the end, trickle down to my employees as being something that they mirrored and adapted to. So that's been nice, especially because we were closed for 2 months during the March of last year when Governor Newsom closed all dental offices for 2 months. And when we had to come back, there was a lot of fear amongst professionals, dental professionals. We didn't know if the aerosol was going to spread and cause more exposure, but that ended up being very minimal. So there's really no cases coming out of dental offices. So that's been a good motivation for just all the employees. And then again, the calm nature, I think, helped them immensely. But lastly, I've been pretty generous about raises and bonuses, but throughout this time, I know they're working very hard. So we've, gave them, more frequent raises and more frequent bonuses. So that's been always good.
What are some advantages and disadvantages of leading a small business in the pandemic?
I think leading a small business in crisis such as the pandemic, you're able to kind of make changes quicker, whereas versus a large corporation, it's more difficult because let's say you have to retrain staff or retrain employees in a new situation. We're able to pivot better and make changes a lot quicker. So I think that's the big advantage. The disadvantage, I think, comes where the revenues and capital, bigger companies obviously have a lot more. So if we were to close for a month or two, that's very detrimental for a small business, especially in a pandemic. So without a PPP loan, it wouldn't have been possible, but that is the downside for small businesses.
Are there any benefits / good things that have come out of the pandemic for your business?
I always think of myself as an optimist. So I think that's a very good question. So I do like that question more. We actually implemented what's called virtual care through Invisalign as of last year. And what that is with Invisalign, you can download the app for the patient. They can upload photos onto the app. And then I can actually look at it and our staff can look at it and see the progress. So they don't necessarily have to come into every visit, but they can maybe skip every other visit. So that's been actually very efficient. And then during the pandemic closure and such, that so it was not as much of a problem for Invisalign patients, but not so much for braces patients, of course. So that was a big positive. And secondarily, our office has always been clean and highest utmost care for sterilization and such. But because of the COVID virus, we've kind of taken it to the next level with medical grade air purifiers, external suction unit. So all those things I think led to cleaner office, and I think cleaner office in the end is better for patients and for us. I think everybody's happier going to the office. That's even cleaner. So that's been a big benefit. So win-win for everybody.
Well, awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for meeting.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Sophie.
Hi, I'm Issa Regan, and for my project, I decided to interview Mr. Afar, who is the theater teacher at Carlsbad, because he always inspires us to be the best leaders we can, and because I wanted to share his story. So here we go. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Issa Regan and thank you so much for watching. Today I'll be interviewing Mr. Afar to ask him some questions concerning leadership, his leadership experience, and the challenges he has faced and how he has overcome them. Thank you for watching, but before we get into the interview, let's learn a little bit about his career first. Mr. Afar studied at Cal State Long Beach, Saddleback College, and San Diego State University and graduated with a BA in theater arts with an emphasis on directing. He went into acting professionally, but decided that he wanted to be on the other side and became a director. Soon after, he began producing his own shows, and he did this completely on his own and funded them all by himself, which he did by working 2 jobs. This got him noticed in the LA scene, where he produced different shows at the Fringe Festival, which is a Southern California festival where newer musicals and plays are produced. He was also noticed in the Bay Area, where he worked at different theater companies, including Navajo Theater Company and Marin Theater Company. He also worked on Amelie the Musical. Please stay tuned to hear more from Mr. Afar, more about his career as a director and a teacher, his thoughts on leadership, and what challenges he has faced and how he has overcome them. Wow, he's had an interesting career. Now let's hear from him. What are the challenges that you faced when you were teaching in person, since you just started teaching theater at Carlsbad?
Well, last year was my first year teaching high school ever. So the challenges were I didn't know where to start. There was so much material that I wanted to cover, and I didn't know what to do. The standards don't help me because they're really broad. And so they're like, you can cover theater history. like, okay, like how? So I had to think about which direction I wanted to go with the theater department. And since the theater department was in such a state of, I guess you could say, flux and change and all these things, I was making a lot of decisions that I was like, I don't know if this is the right decision. Because I always wanted to make the right decision for you guys as the students to make sure that, yes, you guys were having fun. Yes, that's important, but that you were actually learning and growing. And I was challenging you. And that this wasn't just like a easy A, where it is an easy A, but where it's like an easy A in terms of you're actually trying and doing stuff and moving forward and growing as a human being. And so that was a huge challenge. I didn't really have behavior problems. I mean, there were some, but that's typical. But
how do you think you overcame that and went through that?
I had to just believe in myself. I had to just say, you know what? We're just going to do this. And we're just going to see what works. And I've opened myself up now. I see that the students and I really grow from a symbiotic relationship in terms of where I give constructive criticism to them and then I ask for it back. And so it's fair. So then I see what worked and what didn't. And then I reflect on it. I look at all of the constructive criticism I get and I'm like, okay, what do I want to take and what don't I want to take? And that's been really helpful. And then I learned that last year because especially fairy tale unit, see how this works. And it was like half of it was successful. And that's just kind of teaching. Like it's a trial and error and seeing what sticks and seeing what doesn't. And I overcame it just by believing in myself and asking for feedback, like really asking for feedback, but making sure people gave it to me in the nicest way possible, I guess.
Thank you. And then similarly, what do you think are the challenges that you faced taking everything and putting it online and how you've overcome those things?
Yeah, oddly enough, this year was less of a struggle than last year. It's odd. I don't know why. I think it could be because I feel more confident. I feel like I know where I want to go. I know where the gaps are for you guys, like where you need to fill in like your learning and where I want the department to go. I have a really clear objective. I know that the leadership team idea was really rocky at first, but now it's really solidified and it's really working and it's like everything's starting to come together. And so this year, I'm just starting to see all of my hard work coming together and just kind of doing this. It's not there yet, but it's coming together. And all of the students' hard work helping support me and the department and bringing it together. So this year has been a challenge in terms of like executing the right lesson in the right way so then all students can approach it equally in an equal environment that they can learn, which has been really, really tough. But in terms of doing productions and all of that stuff, that's been a little bit easier just because I'm able to get more creative with it and do it in a virtual environment rather than have to worry about set pieces and props and all these other things. But now I'm starting to like see that doing it this year is still a challenge. Just I think I just have a better grasp on it. I think, does that make sense?
Yes, I see what you mean.
Okay. So
thank you.
Yes.
How is leading as a theater teacher different from how you led when you were a director?
That's a really good question. As a director, my expectations for my actors were come in, warm up yourself, get ready, get into position, let's go. It was like no fooling around. Like it was fun, but I knew what to expect of my actors. I knew what I needed them to do. I knew that when they came into the room, they knew it was time for rehearsal. They knew that I'm serious and I need you to take the time. We're all getting paid here. We need to take advantage of the money that we're making and do what we're being asked to do. So it was a lot more stringent and strict and to the point. And I had a schedule and I knew what I wanted to do and I would get disappointed and all of that stuff if I didn't do that. So that was a lot of what I was doing, is a lot of delegating and making sure that people understood that they had a job to do. You're getting paid, you do the job. So it was very professional, very structured. Leading as a teacher is a lot different. Students learn in a very structured environment. However, they need more positive reinforcement rather than actors who need validation, and they get validation from each other rather than the director. The director does give them validation. However, it's just a different kind of validation than I do for students. For students, it's seeing with their work saying, good job. However, this is what you need to do. So with an actor, instead of saying good job, I skip that step and I say, okay, here's what you need to do. So with a student, it's just kind of adding a few more layers of positivity in there and then giving them the constructive criticism and then ending with positivity, just like a sandwich, and trying to make sure that they understand that it's not coming from a place of criticism, but a place of love and growth. And then I'm trying to help them grow. So it's just a different leadership style.
Thank you. The last thing that I had was, do you have any advice for future leaders?
Sure. So some advice I have for other future leaders is, number one, have an objective. Have an idea in mind of what you want to do. No matter how big it is, just have an objective. And when you have that objective, think about how you're going to get that objective. So, for instance, I want to be a professional director. How can I get to be a professional director? I want to get a bachelor's in directing, and then I want to start working. So you have all of that. And another thing is to find as many people as you can who are supportive of you, who think similarly to you, and who think differently than you, who will challenge you and help you grow, just like a teacher would. Because honestly, a leader does not grow and does not lead by themselves. They're supported by the people beneath them. And so if you don't have anyone else to support you and help you and guide you, like a parent, like a teacher, like a friend, like someone who can be honest with you and give you honest, constructive feedback, a leader usually doesn't develop as quickly or as efficiently as the other leaders will. So that's my advice, is to really surround yourself with people you love, but that challenge you and make you think more critically. The hardest thing with a leader is that everyone thinks that everything falls on your shoulders and that if you mess up, it's your fault. And that's not true. The sign of a good leader is not if you fall down, it's about how you get back up.
Thanks again for watching, and a special thanks to Mr. FR. Stay tuned for the next segment.
Hello, I'm Samuel Daher, and my video is called Leadership in Film, the Power of Compromising Collaboration. So I discuss how filmmakers like the Russo brothers, Anthony and Joe Russo, and James Cameron succeed as leaders by communicating with peers and compromising when disagreements occur between groups. So yeah, you can play the video.
Hello, I'm Samuel Daher. My project is about filmmaking and how filmmakers were able to develop over time and work together and be able to be successful during this pandemic. I'm going to be showing an interview of Anthony and Joe Russo, which was conducted by the YouTube channel Kinowetter. Anthony and Joe Russo are very successful directors. They have directed Avengers Endgame and numerous other Marvel movies, as well as the new movie Cherry. Throughout Anthony and Joe Russo's life, they had to work together to create big projects. And as leaders, they had to compromise and accept each other's ideas to be able to work together and create a project bigger than themselves.
It is difficult because you do have to have the ability to, you have to have a high level of trust. You have to be able to let go of your ego at certain times and compromise, or else the relationship can't work, the partnership can't work. But for us, it feels worth it because what we get out of the collaboration is something we feel that is just much bigger than what we could create individually. And that excites us.
Another group of partners who have worked in the film set, Arnold Schwarzenegger and James Cameron, discuss how humans and humanity can move on and move forward through the pandemic.
I mean, I couldn't have predicted in January where we were going to be today with this global pandemic. But I think that, what I can predict is that we have a choice. We have a choice. We're smart. We have this thing called consciousness. None of the other creatures in the animal kingdom have that ability to look at the future and plan against it, or plan for it, I should say.
Humans have the ability to think critically and work together. Throughout the pandemic, we were able to do that and become successful through creating many innovative ideas. Through compromising and working together, we were able to be successful. And sometimes, leaders have to compromise for the success of everybody. This is Samuel Daher reporting for Student Leadership Council. Hello, I'm Sam.
Hey everyone, my name is Luke McClellan and I'm a junior at CHS, and I had the opportunity to work with Aaron Del Grande over the past couple weeks for this interview with Coach Madsen of Sage Creek Baseball, where we get to hear about the importance of leadership in sports amidst COVID-19. We get to hear that firsthand. It's really awesome. Hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Hi, welcome to our exclusive interview with Coach Madsen from Sage Creek Baseball.
What are your strengths that make you effective as a leader?
My strengths as effective as a leader. Well, I'll tell you what I like to do is have great leadership as players, like you and the guy filming here, Connor Blau, and the rest of our senior leadership. What I try to do is I do try to lead when necessary, but I try to give the responsibility of leadership to the players, and especially when you have good players who know how to lead. I think that's the best way to have good team chemistry. To lead a team, I think, is best when it's coming through their peers and not just a coach.
Mm-hmm. What have you become successful as a leader, and how have you gained the trust of your players?
I think a good way, just like that question too, is a good way to gain trust is to give trust back. I trust all you guys, and I try to give trust into guys who know what they're doing. You guys are such great ball players and know the game so well that giving trust to you guys, hopefully you give it back to me. And then obviously being in here, over the course of 3 to 4 years of having everybody, hopefully we've been able to build good, strong relationships, and we can trust each other with baseball and anything.
Mm-hmm. And how has the coronavirus affected you as a leader, and what have you done to adapt to it?
It's been obviously a tough situation to try and get guys together and to try and figure out how to lead in this situation, because you've never had to lead in this situation. We've had different baseball seasons, but it's new for everybody. New for figuring out how to play, new for figuring out how to coach, how to lead. So I guess it's been a growing process through the whole thing leading up to this. Now we're back to basically normal and we're able to go status quo, but I guess it was just trying to I don't know, communicate like we always do. I think over the course of the coronavirus, when we weren't able to see each other, was just trying to communicate with you guys so we could be on the same page and be ready to go for when that time did come. And now it's here, and you guys are nothing but ready.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach Madsen and Aaron. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in.
Samuel, was that the end of your presentation? Just confirming.
Yes, that's the.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Claire Corrigan, and I was honored this year to participate in the Student Leadership Council. First off, thank you everyone who attended tonight, and thank you for your ongoing support throughout this program. Second, congratulations to all the students for your stellar work on your projects, as well as throughout this year. All of this could not have happened had it not been for the Carlsbad Educational Foundation. We cannot express our gratitude for your support enough. Finally, before our mentors wrap up this evening with a few slides, on behalf of all the students, I would like to express my deepest gratitude for your guys' support throughout this program. We have learned so much about what it means to be a leader through your lived examples and have grown so much in the process. Again, thank you everyone. And now for the final wrap up.